Here is something most folks never realize. The garlic you buy at the store, those small white bulbs in the little net bag, are very often the worst garlic you can get. Picked early, shipped from halfway around the world, sometimes treated to keep it from sprouting, and weeks or months old before it ever reaches your kitchen. And here's the part that ought to make you smile. Garlic is one of the very easiest things in all of gardening to grow. It costs almost nothing. You plant it in the fall when the rest of the garden is going to sleep. You barely tend it through the winter, and the next summer you dig up bulbs 3 times the size and 10 times the flavor of anything in that net bag. Enough to cook with all year and to plant again, so you never buy garlic again as long as you live. Today I'm going to show you the whole of it. Exactly when to plant, how deep, how far apart, the one stalk you must cut off, how to know the very day it's ready to dig, and, most important for keeping it, how to cure and store it so it lasts you clear through to next summer's harvest. Here's the first truth, and it's the one that surprises everybody. Garlic is planted in the fall, not the spring. You put it in the ground in autumn, just as you're putting the rest of the garden to bed, and it sits through the winter, growing roots down in the cold soil, and then leaps up in spring to make its bulb. It needs that cold. Garlic actually requires a stretch of cold weather, down around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, that's about 4 Celsius, for several weeks, to trigger it to form a proper bulb. Plant it in spring instead, and you'll get a sad little undersized thing. So fall planting is the whole foundation, and the rest is easy. My name is Jacob Stoltzfus. I am Amish, and I farm here in Lancaster County, in Pennsylvania, where we plant our garlic every fall as the leaves are turning, and dig it the next summer and braid it up to hang in the cool of the cellar, enough to feed the family all year and to put back in the ground come autumn. My grandfather grew his garlic from the same line of bulbs for decades, saving the best each year to replant, never once buying a clove. That is the way it's meant to be done, and it's a simple, satisfying thing. Let me hand it to you with all the numbers. Let me start with what to plant because this matters and most folks get it wrong. Do not plant garlic from the grocery store. It may be a variety poorly suited to your climate. It may carry disease, and it's often been treated with something to stop it sprouting, which is the very thing you want it to do. Instead, get what's called seed garlic from a good nursery, a farmer's market, or a seed catalog. And you should know there are 2 main kinds. The first is hardneck garlic. It grows a stiff stalk up the center. It's very cold hardy, which makes it the right choice for cold winter country like ours here in Pennsylvania. And it makes 1 ring of big, easy-to-peel cloves. The second is softneck garlic, no stiff stalk, so it can be braided. It does better in warmer places. It makes more but smaller cloves, and it stores the longest. This is mostly what you find in stores. For most of the country, and especially cold regions, hardneck is the grower's favorite. Whichever you pick, when it's time to plant, you break the bulb apart into its separate cloves. And here's a key rule. Plant only the biggest cloves, because a big clove makes a big bulb, and a little clove makes a little one. Eat the small ones, plant the big ones. Now the planting itself, the timing first, because it's the single biggest thing that decides your bulb size. You want to plant in the fall, generally somewhere from late September into November, about 2 weeks after your first hard killing frost. Here in the mid-Atlantic, that's usually mid-October into mid-November, when the soil has cooled to around 50 degrees. The idea is to give the cloves time to grow roots before the ground freezes, but not so much time that they push up a lot of tender green leaf that winter will kill. Plant too early, and that top growth freezes off. Plant too late, and the clove doesn't root in and can get heaved up out of the ground by the frost. Aim for those couple of weeks after the first hard frost. Now, I want to take a moment, because this is the part that matters. The depth and the spacing, because getting these right is most of the whole job. Garlic likes loose, rich, well-drained soil in full sun. Work in some compost or well-rotted manure first, never fresh manure. Then you set each clove pointed end up. This matters. The pointed end is where the shoot comes from, and the flat end is the root end. And you push it down so the clove sits about 2 to 3 inches deep. That's 5 to 7 or 8 centimeters of soil over it. For spacing, set the cloves about 3 to 6 inches apart, call it a hand's width, in the row, with the rows about 6 inches to a foot apart, depending on your beds. Crowd them too close and the bulbs come out small. Pointed end up, 2 to 3 inches deep, a hand's width apart. Then, the moment you've planted, you mulch. And don't skip this. It's the garlic's winter blanket. Cover the whole bed with about 3 to 4 inches of straw or shredded leaves. That mulch does 3 jobs. It keeps the soil temperature steady so the cold doesn't heave the cloves up out of the ground. It holds in moisture, and it smothers the weeds. Come spring, when the shoots are coming up, you can pull the mulch back a bit to let the soil warm, or leave it to keep the weeds down. And weeds matter, because garlic is a poor competitor and will make small bulbs if weeds crowd it, so keep that bed clean. Through the spring, water it about an inch a week if the rain doesn't, especially when the bulbs are swelling in late spring. And here's a small but important rule. Stop watering about 2 weeks before you harvest, to let the bulbs firm up and dry their wrappers so they'll store well. Now here is a thing that catches folks by surprise, and it's important if you grow the hardneck kind. In early summer, around June, the hardneck garlic sends up a curling flower stalk from the center. It's called a scape, and it loops around in a pretty curl. You must cut that scape off, and here's why. The University of Maine found that if you leave the scape on, it steals energy from the bulb and can shrink your final bulb by as much as 48%, nearly half. So when the scape has curled around, you snap or cut it off where it meets the top leaves. And the good news is the scape itself is a treat, tender and mildly garlicky, wonderful chopped into a stir-fry or a salad or made into garlic butter. So you cut the scape, you save your bulb size, and you get a bonus harvest besides. Cut the scapes. Now, knowing exactly when to harvest is the next skill, and it's read from the leaves. Each leaf on the garlic plant connects down to a papery wrapper around the bulb, so you don't want to lose too many leaves before you dig. The sign is this. Harvest when the lower 3 or 4 leaves have turned brown and dried, but while the upper 5 or 6 leaves are still green. That's usually sometime in late June through July, depending on your climate. If you're not sure, pull one bulb and cut it across. If the cloves have filled out their papery wrappers, it's ready. And here's the rule. When in doubt, dig a little early rather than late, because if you leave it too long, the bulb gets overripe and the cloves split apart and burst their wrappers, and split bulbs won't store. Dig when the lower leaves brown and the upper ones are still green. To dig, you loosen the soil under the bulbs gently with a garden fork. Don't just yank or you'll snap the stalk off and leave the bulb buried, and don't bruise or cut the bulbs because a wound invites rot. Lift the whole plant, roots, stalk and all, and shake or gently brush off the loose soil. And, this is important, do not wash the garlic. Washing it adds moisture right when you need it to dry, and that invites disease. Just brush off the dirt and leave the skins on. Now comes the step that decides whether your garlic keeps for months or rots in a few weeks. Curing. Curing just means drying the bulbs slowly with their tops and roots still attached so the outer skins go papery and seal the bulb. You take the whole plants, don't cut anything off yet, and you lay them out in a single layer or hang them in small loose bundles in a place that's warm but not hot, dry, dark, and most of all very airy with good air moving all around them. A barn, a shed, a garage, a covered porch, a screen rack, anywhere with shade and breeze. Keep them out of direct sun and out of high heat, above about 90 degrees, because that'll cook them. And you let them cure like that for about 2 to 3 weeks, until the outer skins are dry and papery, the neck where the stalk meets the bulb has gone tight and dry, and the roots are dry and stiff. That's cured. Once they're cured, you clean them up for storage. Brush off the last of the dirt, still no washing, and peel away just the dirtiest outer skin if you like, but not too many layers, since each layer protects the bulb. Trim the roots down close to about 1/4 inch, and cut the tops off, leaving about 1 to 2 inches of stem above the bulb, unless you've grown softneck and want to braid them, in which case you leave the whole soft tops on and braid them into a rope. Then storage, and this ties right into the keeping rules we've talked about before. Garlic wants to be stored cool, dark, dry, and airy, somewhere around 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 10 to 13 Celsius, in fairly dry air with good circulation. You hang it in braids or keep it in a mesh bag or an open basket where air moves through it. And here are the 2 things never to do. Do not store garlic in a damp basement, where the moisture will rot it or sprout it, and do not store it in the refrigerator. The fridge is both too cold and too humid, and it'll make the garlic sprout and go soft. Stored right, hardneck garlic keeps about 3 to 6 months, and softneck can keep up to a year. Long enough, with a good crop, to last you clear through until the next harvest comes in. And from that crop, you set aside your very biggest, finest bulbs, and come fall, you break them apart and plant them again. And that's how you grow your own garlic forever. Free, from your own line, never buying a clove again. Let me name the mistakes plainly. The first, planting in spring instead of fall. Garlic needs that winter cold. Plant it in autumn. The second, planting grocery store garlic, which may be treated or ill-suited or diseased. Get proper seed garlic. The third, for hardneck growers, leaving the scape on, which can shrink your bulb by nearly half. Cut it. The fourth, harvesting too late, so the bulbs overripen and split and won't keep. Dig when the lower leaves brown, a touch early rather than late. And the fifth, skipping the curing or storing in a damp basement or the fridge. Cure it dry and airy for a couple weeks, then keep it cool and dry. Avoid those 5, and you'll have garlic to spare. Let me be honest about the limits, too. Garlic is easy, but it is not instant. It's in the ground the better part of a year, fall to summer, so it asks patience more than work. It can struggle in soggy, poorly drained ground where it rots, so it wants well-drained soil or a raised bed. And the very long storage, that near-a-year keeping, really belongs to the softneck types. The big flavored hardnecks we love in the cold north keep a good 3 to 6 months, not the whole year, so plan to eat those first and let the softnecks carry you to spring. None of that is hardship. It's just knowing what to expect. Now think for a plain moment about what's really being sold to us. That little net bag of bleached white garlic in the store, shipped thousands of miles, often treated, often months old and already drying out or sprouting, that's sold to us as if garlic were a thing that has to come from far away through a long chain of trucks and middlemen. But garlic is perhaps the single most self-reliant crop there is. Plant it once from good seed, and you can save your own and replant it every fall for the rest of your life, never buying another bulb, growing better garlic than money can buy. There's no company that profits from a family growing its own garlic forever from its own bulbs. So the simple knowledge faded, and folks came to believe garlic is something you buy in a bag. It isn't. They sold us shipped, treated, faraway garlic, and let us forget that a clove pushed into the fall soil will feed us for a year and give us next year's seed besides, the way it fed our great-grandparents who never once bought a bulb. So here's what I want you to do this fall. Get a few heads of good seed garlic, hardneck if you're up north, and a couple weeks after your first hard frost, work some compost into a sunny, well-drained bed. Break the heads into cloves. Plant the biggest ones pointed end up, 2 to 3 inches deep, and a hand's width apart, and cover the bed with 3 or 4 inches of straw. Then near forget about it through the winter. In spring, keep the weeds down. In June, if it's hardneck, cut the curling scapes and cook them. And come July, when the lower leaves brown, dig your bulbs, brush them off, and hang them somewhere airy and shady to cure for a few weeks. Then braid them or bag them and keep them cool and dry, and set aside your best bulbs to plant again. Do that once and you'll have your own garlic better than any stores for the rest of your days. Tell me down in the comments below. Do you grow your own garlic, hardneck or softneck, and have you been replanting your own line for years? And did your parents or grandparents braid their garlic and hang it in the cellar the old way? I read every comment, and the patient growing wisdom you all share is the very reason I keep making these. And next time, I'm going to show you how to deal with aphids, those little sapsuckers that swarm the garden, the natural way, without reaching for a single chemical spray. So until then, plant in the fall, pointed end up, mulch it deep, cut the scapes, dig when the lower leaves brown, cure it dry and airy. And remember that the people who grew their own garlic year after year from their own bulbs knew things we are only just now starting to remember.